for this session, which is talking about something very special. Textile is something that is very much a part of our SDGs and affects several of the SDGs. Indian textile traditions are inherently rooted in sustainability. The session today aims to explore how handlooms and the sustainability are, are interlinked, very closely connected with each other. So the session is focusing on sustainability and Indian handloom traditions. So may I now first welcome Dr. M. Beena, DC Handlooms, to please chair the session. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us for this session. Please, ma'am. May I now invite Professor Ashok Chatterjee, Craft Council of India, is part of Governing Council of CEE and ex-director NID to join us. Kavya Saxena, Executive Director to Khamir. Samvit Sarabhai from Rajkot Designs. Sheera Singer, she's a textile artist and visiting US Fulbright Nehru Scholar at NID. Very welcome to all of you. And Dr. Ashok Khosla will be joining us in few minutes. He's on the way, but he is a chairperson of CEE Governing Council and also founder director of Development Alternatives. So he will also be joining us. Before we begin the panel discussion today, ma'am, we would like to inaugurate two books that are on this subject. I will. Tanishka Kachru and Rebecca. There are two books. One is Parampara and or Paryavaran, Sustainability in the Handloom Traditions of India, which I would request ma'am to please present it to the audience. And briefly telling about this book, but I want ma'am to. So briefly, before I invite the panelists, briefly mentioning about the book. The Parampara in Paryavaran was a book that was built on a UNEP study that CEE commissioned to document the handloom traditions of India. And the book was published with the support of DC Handlooms. And thank you very much, ma'am, for inaugurating it. May I now invite Tanishka and Rebecca also to share a couple of words about the book.
Thank you so much, Janki, and thank you to CE for including us in this wonderful panel and book release, and to Dr. Meena for really helping us with this. So quickly to tell you about the book is published by Routledge. It has 9 sections, 28 chapters, 35 contributors. And for us, it has been a real pleasure to work with all these contributors. We started in 2020, just when COVID hit. And, there was lots of ups and downs, but we're really glad it's out. Um, Thank you also to Ashok Chatterjee for being our guiding light for this book and for his wonderful contribution to it. I'll hand over to Rebecca to tell you what the book is about and why we felt it was really important to do something like this.
So we realized that craft and sustainability are huge themes across praxis, and most of the readings of craft are based in a developed world context. We really wanted people to understand what craft in India is about, and therefore we had a lot of authors who are doers, because generally people who write are not the people who do, and people who do generally don't write in academic writing. So it was a great pleasure to have a lot of authors who have hands-on work in the field, and we hope that this is a way of including craft from the Indian perspective, and therefore the developing world perspective, in global praxis, and especially academics on craft, sustainability, livelihood, and all of these interrelated themes. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing the book. May I now invite Dr. Bambina ma'am to please take the session and give her opening remarks.
Yeah, I'll go there.
My esteemed fellow panelists, Dr. Ashok Khosla, Professor Ashok Chatterjee, Kavya Saxena, Sanvit Sarabhai, Shira Singer, and of course the moving energy behind all this, Shri Karthikey Sarabhai, and dear friends from the sector, from CE. First of all, let me confess that it's a great pleasure for me to be here, because though I have been associated with CE for the book, to actually coming here and seeing you at your home and seeing this beautiful campus is such a pleasure. So thank you for this opportunity. Now, there are esteemed panelists who know the craft very well, and they will be speaking to you more on that. But what I would like to present before you is the overall profile of the sector, what the sector means to in governance, in the governance discourse, in terms of administration, in terms of politics also. So that larger picture I would like to present before you, and why today's topic is so important for all of us. So the handloom sector is a sector which provides employment to rural Indians. So we are talking of 35.22 million weavers and workers as per official records. So the unofficial records will be larger than this. In fact, I think Ashok Chatterjee's work in the field says that the numbers are far bigger. Now, this is a category of people who are working in the rural areas, mainly working in their homes. So it's a domestic industry of sorts. And from the gender point of view, 72% of this 35.22 lakhs are women, and 68% comes from the SC, ST and OBC categories. So this is a sector which in terms of number, in terms of livelihood, in terms of social importance, in terms of gender importance, has a lot of importance for the country. Now, coming to how handloom figures in the sustainability discourse. We all know that historically this is a rich tradition. Over centuries it has developed, and in each area, see, one reason why people ask as to how you have so many crafts, so many varieties. So India is a big country, and in each area, based on the raw material available, based on the culture of the people, based on the folklore of the people, based on the climatic variance amongst the region, different crafts have been developed. So these crafts are symbolic, they're just not clothes, they're not just apparel, they actually symbolize what that region is. What is the history of that region? What is the culture of that region? What is the livelihood of the people? So there is so much to learn from these crafts. So every craft, so every sari that you see, every mundu that you see has a story of its own. And very primary in this story is the sustainability element. We know that handloom is, by definition, in fact our act defines handloom as a loom which does not use power. So something which does not use power, something which is, low on carbon footprint, low on energy utilization, something which uses natural fiber in majority of places, except for the new wave of handlooms in certain areas. Handloom still uses natural fibers, natural dyes in most of the regions, though it has been diluted a little over the years. And it has the motifs, the use are all locally, it is meant for use of the local people. So the very word sustainability, there are so many columns which it ticks. And that is why we want handlooms to come into the sustainability discourse. So handloom was there for a long time, sustainability was also there for a long time. But I think this conscious bringing together of the two has been, I think, and the book is a very important landmark in joining together of these two discourses, which though we knew it all along, to actually document it, actually identify which are the crafts, how are they sustainable, how do they figure in the sustainability dialogue. So that was a great step which we could do thanks to the collaboration between the department and CE. And it is post the book that we have thought that this dialogue we should make it at more fora, maybe in more to more audiences in more regions. So this is thinking behind today's session. So it is a pleasure for me to be here and to head this sustainability discourse within the handloom department. In fact, I'm happy that my officers are also here today, because so even my field officers, so that what they do, they realize that it is not just a job, it is not just a government job, but it is something much more. It is actually making a difference to the world they live in. The sustainability of this entire country and universe is what we are talking about. So I think I will leave it there, and then we will hear from the other panelists, and then we can maybe take a few questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for your very encouraging opening remarks. And may I now invite Dr. Khosla to kindly give his views and comments on this.
Thank you for inviting me to be in this session. Some of you, including Dr. Veena, and is that on? It's working. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Should I go over there? Yeah, that's good. Okay. A few weeks ago in Delhi, we had a session of this sort, and some of you, Dr. Beena and Karthikeyan and others were there, so you'll have to forgive me for repeating. Is it working? Closer. All right, I'm now as close as I can be, without putting the mic into my mouth. So I'll go over there. Yeah, I'll go over there. That's fine. Thank you. Now, that's much better. I was saying that this is a little bit of deja vu. I was at the session in New Delhi a few weeks ago with the same participants, so those of you who were there, forgive me for repeating myself because I have only so many things to say on the subject. A long time ago, in the early 80s, my organization, which is called Development Alternatives, my organization is also CEE, but I have several organizations, and where I work during the day, Development Alternatives was looking at ways to transform the lives of people in rural India, particularly the women. And we worked on things like chulas and worked on natural farming and a number of other things. And one of the things that was obvious was the fact that one of the largest employers in rural India is employment options in rural India is weaving. And so we decided that we would apply high-tech thinking and high-tech design to develop the whole weaving chain, from yarn making to spinning to the weaving to dyeing to all the way to finished, with improved engineering, if you like. And I got hold of these 3 young graduates from IIT Delhi who would have otherwise ended up in Silicon Valley. They were textile engineers, and they came and joined me in DA for about 4 or 5 years, and we completely revolutionized the weaving chain, and it was called the Tara Loom. It was very famous at the time. It went wild and viral in the market, and basically its purpose was to improve the productivity of the weaver. Its purpose was not really focusing on the traditions in the sense of designs of textiles, but in the traditional occupation of handloom production. The advantage that the Tara loom had was that it was semi-automatic. It didn't need electricity. It was a handloom, but it had flywheels and take-ups and automatic let-offs, and it basically had a very high-speed shuttle which is operated by hand. And because of the automatic nature of the machine, it produced very high-quality cloth. It was essentially uniform tension, and therefore the weaver, this woman in the village, could actually overnight, literally, with 8 hours of retraining, make 4 or 5 times as much money. And that was our objective. So I want to be very clear that we were not promoting the kinds of designs you get in faraway places. We were trying to get more money for the weaver. And that basically was the purpose of this. We were very successful. It worked. It was easy to retrain people who were already weavers on a frame loom, shuttle loom, and it essentially produced the results we wanted. We did this with the same loom, with a slight adjustment. You could use it from anything from fine parachute silk to coarse woolen blankets. So it was very versatile, it was very flexible, and as I say, it served the purpose of creating higher productivity and income. But it was, in our opinion, a truly Gandhian technology. And in fact, I related the anecdote in Delhi that Rajiv Gandhi, when he was Prime Minister, brought as a guest the Duke of Edinburgh to this exhibition that we were showing this loom at in Pragati Maidan. And Prince Philip is a pretty sharp person, and he came up to me and he said, "Would the Mahatma have approved?" And I said, "Yes, this is really a Gandhian technology. And for us, it is actually the ultimate vision of Mahatma Gandhi, that he was really a very high-tech champion. He had offered a huge prize for any innovation, and indeed the Amrit Charkha was a result of his promotion. And we believed that the Tara loom was a very solid example of a Gandhian technology. But in spite of the fact that we added dobbies and jacquards and so on, if you really wanted intricate designs, this was not the technology. The technology would not get the benefits that we had built into it of higher productivity if you tried to use it in intricate saris or intricate designs. And that's where we sort of lost heart, because we didn't really want people to be producing large quantities of toweling and cotton sheets, and that was obviously a good thing to do for those who wanted to make more money, but it wasn't really aimed at what is the word traditions in this title of this meeting. So gradually it wore out. We still have orders, people still make it. There are lots of companies and businesses that use the Tara loom, and indeed sister NGOs like Urmul. Urmul uses the Tara loom to great advantage, and so do a number of others. So I just thought I'd share with you that there are different objectives that we face when we make a technology what it is. And in our case, the Tara loom was the pride and joy of my organization. We made a lot of other innovations, but the Tara loom was something that we loved and cherished, but it wasn't really a pure promoter of Indian traditional textiles. And so we haven't really pushed it that far. We still sell it, people come and buy it, and it's a good machine. But that's my one contact with handloom and technology and textiles. The other contact is that we have a huge nationwide presence in the recycling paper business. Paper recycling, handmade recycled paper, is a big business for us, and we sell the entire factory to make it, to small enterprises, to NGOs, to various kinds of organizations. And that needs textile waste. So a large part of our recycling business is very dependent on waste either from the garment industry or from the textile manufacturing industry. And that is something that we see as a kind of upscaling or side scaling of the waste materials that come out of this industry. And I think that's a circularity that's very important, and basically that's something that you need to keep in mind as a part of the textile industry, because it produces a large quantity of waste, and we have a way of using it well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now invite Professor Chatterjee for his comments on this?
Thank you, Janki. Thank you to CEE for this opportunity. I think we're very privileged to have Dr. Veena with us here. She was introduced as the DC Handlooms. I hope you all know what DC stands for, because I think that's critical to this discussion. Development Commissioner. Underline the word development. What does development mean? The lady sitting in that chair has released a book, but what does she represent? She represents the second largest source of Indian livelihood after agriculture. Along with her colleague, the Development Commissioner Handicrafts. Both of them at this stage are women. And she has underlined that the empowerment of women is a critical factor in this sector. I think it's very important to understand this because Dr. Beena and her colleagues represent the second largest source of livelihood after agriculture in a country of the size of India. And as she has mentioned, there are statistics, but we all are working with the government to take those statistics to a higher level because even with this huge mandate that her office has, I don't want to embarrass you, Dr. Beena, but it must be said that at the highest tables of decision making, Dr. Beena and her colleagues are often not there at the table. Whereas information technology, which employs just a fraction, a small fraction of this number, as well as other industries, are constantly being called to decide on what India's policies should be. Why is this happening? The most dramatic example of this was during COVID, where despite the efforts of the government and of other activists in this sector, there was no single coordinated effort to address the crisis of artisans. And most of those millions who were walking on the roads, leaving cities to get back to their villages for some kind of security, even if it was to die in their villages, they wanted to get back. And I underline that from what Dr. Beena has just mentioned to us, that her mandate and that of others in the government, as well as ours who are sitting here, is to develop rural, non-farm livelihoods. And for that, the hand sector is the prime example. She has already mentioned that this addresses not only rural employment, but also the issue of addressing women who handle more than 50% of this sector. And the numbers that we have often make the women's contribution invisible because the statistics may count the weaver, but the statistics may not count all the processes that are pre-loom and post-loom. And in those two sectors, women do much, if not most, of the work. There is an effort ongoing now, with which we've been consulting with Dr. Beena and her colleagues, to develop a methodology that can assess this sector more correctly in terms of statistics. Now, the sector is not just about statistics, as you have already heard from both the speakers. It's about much more than mere statistics. But the problem is these days that what is not counted is often neglected. So we need to get the data in order to push the hand sector to the top of the development agenda and to point out that Dr. Beena and her colleagues and those of us in this room who are working in this sector, we represent directly 11 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 11. Directly, not indirectly. Directly. And there is no other Indian industry that can make that claim. So it is extremely important for us to understand that these books and these efforts are not just somewhere in the fringe as something nice, beautiful, culturally interesting. They are at the center of what can protect this planet and what can protect the well-being not only of artisans, but what artisans contribute to the well-being of nature as well to the well-being of the planet. And I use this word well-being because the Sustainable Development Goals are actually about well-being. They're not about per capita. They're not about GDP. They're about what per capita and GDP are supposed to serve. And I'll end with one small example. Many people in this room will be familiar with a group of artisans in Rajasthan with whom some of us have been working for many years. Recently, we have been astonished at the fact that the artisans of this country came through the COVID crisis with greater resilience than almost any other sector of industry. Now, there's a lesson in that. There's not time to develop on that. But in this particular set of villages, there was a group of people that we've been in touch with, and their resilience was tested not just through COVID, but how through the past 50, 60 years, they have raised the quality of life for themselves as well as for their families through the loom and through handcraft. But just a few months ago, one of the senior artisans in this village lost his son, who had moved from the loom to a computer job in a bank in nearby Ajmer. He was on his way back to Ajmer after spending the weekend with his father on the loom in his village. And he died at the railway station, falling between the train and the tracks. This horrific accident shook us, because for those who've been working with this community, this boy was the poster boy. He showed that working in the craft sector is not just about parampara in terms of that tradition, but the fact that these young people, because of the craft, were now exercising other options, as this young man had done, practicing the loom, but a person pursuing a computer future in a bank in a nearby city. And now he was gone. So when I called his father and tried to console him and tried to say, is there anything that I or any of us can do for you at this stage? And he said, no. So I said, what are you going to do? He said, I will go to the loom and the loom will tell me. So for somebody who had worked with these people for 50 years, I suddenly realized how little I really knew about them. Because for this man, the loom was not just a machine, it was not just an instrument. It was an entire culture. It was his support system, even at a time of such tragedy. I mention this because that is the power of this sector. And we need to understand what is at stake if a sector of this power is neglected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this touching example and showcasing the importance of the sector once again. May I now request Kavya Saxena to please comment on her.
Good morning, everyone. Respected Dr. Beena and very loving Ashok sir, Samvit, and all the esteemed panelists, the audience here, and everyone who's streaming and watching this on YouTube. It's a great honor for me to be part of this illustrious panel, considering the fact that I come from a hardcore corporate background and pivoted into rural and particularly craft sector. It's been a very transformative journey. As I speak to you, I also represent my organization Khamir, that is based in Kutch and has been doing monumental work in terms of strengthening the entire value chain. So when I was invited by Dr. Janki to speak about sustainability in handloom, I was wondering, how do I talk about something in isolation that has always been part of the sector? Sustainability, for me, as I see, has never been a separate discussion. It has been a part of the tradition. Some of that I was also seeing in the book that Dr. Beena has just released, and it has you'll see a lot of Khameer. So I was so proud that almost every chapter has mention of Khameer. And I also want to bring a fact while Ashok sir brought a really relevant point of how this balance and the tradition needs to be preserved. I would like to present a very millennial outlook of how the newer generation sees this sector. Also, it's relevant at this point because considering that more than half of India diaspora and also world over, we are moving to a generation where there is a lot of young consumer who is already aware of eco-conscious and conscious consumption. The matter is that is handloom sector relevant enough and sustainable enough to cater to this demand? So I also take this opportunity to represent the millennia and Gen Z, that how do we perceive, and I would want to highlight 3 particular factors when I talk of sustainability in handloom. The first one is relevance. Now, since the times immemorial, when we talk of heritage and handloom, things were devised because of the terrain, because of the usability. So we would have a rabari shawl that would be used as a throw or as a shawl, or there would be a heavier skirt made of wool, and that would be worn by pastoralists. I'm talking in terms of Kutch, but then as you move towards Kashmir, you would have similar throws or a farran in which you can keep your heated, so everything was very relevant to the times. Over time, also what happened was, because after independence, as power looms took over, as sir mentioned, crafts became, because this whole revival took a lot of effort, crafts did not align with the consumers, and the mass population, as you must be aware, started consuming more power loom, whereas craft and handmade became elite. And that continued for a while, and all the design language that developed over time were things that were worn by upper middle class to more average to above average spending consumer. As we speak about relevance, I also speak from a point of view that there is a huge influence of terms like K-pop, terms like the color grading that the newer population is using. And it makes me go back and think that even in the natural dyes, we were just playing with primary colors, the colors that actually newer generation and Gen Z prefers. Apart from that, even if we talk about design language, I would want to give a visual example before we talk of Desi Oon as one of the initiative. Can we look at image 2587 over here? Yeah, this one. Okay. Thank you. So this is one of our best-selling piece. It is made of 100% hand-woven, hand-spun Patanwari sheep of Kutch. It's called the Kalori jacket. It's a story piece that Khameer sells. Now, this is one of the favorite bestsellers, and I'll tell you not just from a point of retail, but also from a sustainability angle, that how we've been able to preserve the different aspects. The first part is obviously the raw material and the value, the whole process. We have been able to retain buying the yarn directly from the herder, taking it to the spinner, spinning it on an amba charkha, and then taking it to a weaver. Then also what we have been able to do with this particular piece is, there is a story. The heritage story that we depict in this Kalori jacket is that there was a Baba or a saint in Kutch who would do a puja or a tap. And his tap was so strong that the sea back then, because Kutch was a sea-bound area, it turned into a white massive salt desert. And then you will also see a lot of motifs like, as you move down, you will see the saint, you will see the little camels, and it literally weaves that entire story of how Kutch came through this folklore. So the story was preserved in a very modern way. And can we go back to another picture? And if you see, what we have done with the design is, we have kept it free size, we have kept it something that can be worn by men, women of any age alike. So it's literally you wear a part of Kutch as you don this garment, while keeping the design aesthetic very simple by not playing around colors, enhancing the very point that relevance in this era for handloom is a critical part of sustainability, which also includes your dyeing, your color patterns, how you present your story, and things like that. The other aspect that I want to highlight around sustainability is availability. So prior to me spearheading Khmer, I was also in Orissa and the Chhattisgarh border, where I was working with a lot of particularly vulnerable tribes. And one of the handloom sector I got introduced was the nearby cluster of Kotpad, which is very famous. And also, this is something that I notice in Arunachal Pradesh also, where I am the FICCI president to a lot of work that happens, is while we are talking about sustainability, the grassroots level issues are also connected to farms, are connected to different aspects that somewhere get forgotten in this value chain. I think Ashok sir spoke about it. I'm just missing Shira sir's name. He spoke about this value chain, is that a lot of stress in the past has been given to the weaver and onwards, but there is a whole lot of back end chain. For instance, if I talk about Desi Own particularly, what happens is over time, Kutch is home to Patanwadi, and I'm just gonna focus on Kutch more because just to keep the conversation tight and also keep the time check. So while Kutch is home to this Patanwadi sheep, which is also similar to the herd that is found in Bikaner, over time, the herders, because of the decline of indigenous wool in the market, have started selling their sheep more for meat, better returns, quicker returns. So what happened to the wool? Either they would just sell the wool in a local market, or they would just discard it because there are no takers. Now what happens is, for instance, an institution like Khmer enters into the picture with the whole idea that we will preserve Desi Oon. But now, what we do not understand is that fodder for that Patanwadi sheep was also contributing to a better yield of wool. How do I manage that? How do I control what the herder is feeding to the sheep? Then I need to also look back and go to the drawing board and give an assurance to a certain set of herders that the next 2 years, for a better yield, I don't just buy your yarn, but I also ensure the kind of fodder that you're feeding, where are the grazing lands that you should be going, considering that the forest land is all, reducing by the day. We also go back and identify those lands where the sheep can graze properly, hence my yield gets better. And then obviously the other chains like how do I card the wool, how do I clean the wool, and all of that comes into picture. Similar is the case with Kotpad, which is an awl dye technique. There's a beautiful article about Kotpad handlooms in this book. So awl is another kind of dye. I'm also running short of time, so availability was the second point. The third point in the sustainability angle is authentication. It is something that's really important. While if you go to khmer.org, you will see the beautiful work Khmer has done in Kala cotton. And as we speak today, the second most important work that we want to be known is Desi Oon in India. That said, till today, we haven't been able to get a certification on Kala. So why is that? Because there are some 100 farms from where we are sourcing our Kala. There are 5-6 dyers who are dyeing and taking up the natural dye work for us. There are over 800 Ambar and Peti Charka women who help us. Now, that certification cannot go to each of these. How do I then bring them together to ensure that what you wear is a certified Kala cotton fabric? There is a lot of Kala available in Andhra. How do I ensure that an artisan entrepreneur is also selling you an authenticated product, whereas an organization also sells you a great product? And I feel if all the work is centered in this era around relevance, availability, and authentication, we will end up solving a lot of sustainability issues at the grassroots. With that, thank you for the time, and thank you.
Thank you, Kavyaji, for bringing out several points and connections of handlooms and sustainability and raising several issues around it. May I now invite Mr. Samvit Sarabhai, to give his perspectives on how do we take handlooms to a global market.
Thank you very much for having me on this panel. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Samvit Sarabhai, and I've been running a company called Rajka Designs, which essentially I got this opportunity to help with the book, which was quite amazing. The big challenge was the richness of Indian textiles and the handloom. It's so wide, and it was a challenge to limit it to only a few. So I would like to talk about the marketability and the relevance of the textile. And how do we market it more? How do we keep it sustainable? And I find that in my experience of 20 years, I find that the best way to do this is to show the process more. I mean, the end product is beautiful, but the large amount of beauty lies in the process of making these textiles. And the best business relationships we've had is when we've taken our clients to these artisan clusters like Kutch to Bengal we've taken a lot to Kashmir. And that's when the excitement happens, and that's where the emotional connect happens. And this is where they make the commitment to bring about the change. And when they take the photographs and when they learn about the craft, when they go back, they can tell about this to their customers. And this really drives the sales, and we can bring work to the artisans. But I find that we are part of the textile community, but the minute you go out of the community, the knowledge of textiles is very low. People don't know the difference between khadi and handloom, for example. People don't know the difference between linen and cotton. A lot of people think it's the same thing. And I think probably this happens because the engagement is very low when you're in the school. And I think we need to have more field visits. I mean, if you look at India, these artisan clusters are all over India, and within 100 kilometers you can probably find one. But we are not engaging enough, and this is what represents the lack of knowledge. I took my daughter Anvita to Kutch, to Kashmir recently, and she got excited when she walked the fields, she saw the spinning, the weaving, and the printing, and that's when she got really excited. And when she brought back some of these garments back home, she could talk about it to her friends, and there's so many stories that she could tell. This is what's missing in the mass-produced textiles. I mean, there are no stories. That's why people look at the price tag and people look at the trend, but I mean, they throw it out. There's no emotional connect. With Indian textiles, we have such a huge connect. And when you visit them and when you build that contact is when you retain it. I mean, we pass on the Indian textiles, we don't throw it away. We keep it, we pass it on to the next generation. And the whole process is very beautiful. And for the next generation, I think people are using a lot of Instagram and social media. They can sort of capture this and we took a lot of photographs, and my daughter was sort of sharing it with her friends. And it's very Instagram friendly. So I think we should really use the new technology to spread this. So to conclude, I think we need to somehow build the engagement with the community. We need to build the engagement at school level. We should have more field visits. Maybe we can have kits where people can sort of do the weaving, people can do the dyeing. I mean, this engagement really needs to start early on. In schools earlier, we used to have these craft classes, and we used to make these big paper battleships. I mean, why are we doing that? Why can't we have our own crafts at schools? I mean, the craft should be really about us making our Indian textiles. And the young is very socially conscious. They're very sort of environmentally conscious. So I'm sure all of this goes hand in hand. I mean, the book is a great tool, but I think we need to have much more engagement through social media, through kits, to field visits, and I think we can really bring about a lot of change. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Samvit Bhai. And may I now invite Ms. Sheera Singh for her remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Janki, for inviting me, and Dr. Bina for your powerful remarks, as well as all the other panelists for your comments. My background is in art education and art therapy, and my particular art process is fabric dyeing and design. I'm here as a learner in India, so what I've experienced and been able to learn is just a small drop in the bucket compared to, the knowledge of the panelists and certainly other people in this room. I was in India 11 years ago and visited in Kutch, which was inspirational in shifting my practice from synthetic dyes to natural dyes. And my focus has been on creating my own color from plants and vegetation in the area where I live, so very place-based kind of work. And since being here, my Fulbright project is focused on learning about India's traditions of natural dyeing and how they are changing and evolving in response to climate and societal impacts. And, I've visited, a small amount of artisans, but Matani Pachetti artists here in Ahmedabad working with natural dyes, and been to Bagru studying about mud block resist printing, and seen kalamkari artists with the natural dyes. And there was actually, as Samvit said, I feel very strongly that education is a key component in sustainability, because people have to have the appreciation of what the processes are and what's involved in order to know how important they are. And there was, maybe some of you were at the Natural Dye Symposium in November that was sponsored by the Craft Council of Gujarat and hosted by Gujarat University, where there were tremendous opportunities for hands-on experiences, where students, as well as the general public, there were, not only college students, but young people in elementary school, had the opportunity to learn from experienced natural dyers and put their hands in vats of indigo and madder and pomegranate, and really experience these things that will make a memorable connection. I've been particularly interested not only in the dye processes, which have their own environmental impacts, but the sourcing of the dyes and where those come from. And people have alluded to the whole chain that comes before you actually get the dye process. And just wanted to highlight a few of the dye company manufacturers that I've either heard. So you must all know of Dr. Bosco Enriquez, who biodye, and his company grew out of a government project to find sustainable plants and parts of it that could be used to create dyes that were color fast and light fast. And he's a plant molecular biologist, and also that every byproduct was then reused, water for irrigation and sludge for fertilization. And his company creates a range of colors that's not seen in many other products. And I visited with Mr. Asif Chipa at USA Natural here in Ahmedabad, and he's building a new facility, but he's a 7th generation dyer. And he, the family, of course, originally was working with all natural dyes, but then shifted to synthetic for economic reasons. And he's brought that back to using natural dyes, and his new facility is all, the water will all be, closed loop, all the, he's committed to zero waste, and he dye, aside from, making the dyes from the dye stuffs, he's also, dyes yarn and fabric and everything. And of course, some of the dye stuffs are threatened, the raw materials. Madder, which is Rubia tinctoria, no, here it's, what is it, cordifolia? I'm not quite sure. Indian madder, which is different than, madder that I can get or grow in the US. It's not totally viable for farmers to grow because, it takes 3 years to get viable tubers, and then you don't always know how much pigment is going to be in it. And so you know, there's not always enough incentive for a farmer to grow it. And I understand that lac, which is a byproduct of, you know, insect, the resinous residue from the insect, and, you know, that has been affected by global warming. So there's lots of issues just even, you know, with the supplies. And then I also visited the offices of Sodani Biotech in Jaipur, who are also quite committed to making their dyes sustainable. So it's inspiring to see that that kind of work is going on, you know, from the beginning of the chain, which isn't even really the beginning of the chain because there's the farmers and everybody else. So I had incredible experiences and learning opportunities, and in my own teaching of elementary students and making art with people of all ages, learning about cultural traditions and having the hands-on experience, you know, I think is vitally important. So, thank you.
Thank you, Shira ma'am. And ma'am, over to you if you have
We can have a few
to
questions
be
from
or
the audience.
yeah.
I don't know about the mic system, but
Yeah. You want to have some questions? Please.
it is.
I hope you can hear me because I don't think this is functioning. It is functioning, okay. Uh, yes, price is absolutely critical because demand will depend on affordability. Therefore, for the sectors that represented on this table, the most critical capacity we need in this sector is marketing. And marketing is not just about one sector. It's about segmenting the market and providing a range of products which corresponds to the range of affordability. Right? Now, there are some interesting things going on. Just now, the artisans of this country have come through a rather disappointing Diwali sales. Along with other sectors of the economy, there is clearly a diminishing of demand. But what is important here is I don't know how accurate these experiences are, but they come from the feedback we are getting from several parts of this country. The high-end products are not being affected. It's very interesting. Apparently there are people with money who will still go for the high-end. What seems to be missing is a middle sector of affordable products for people who do not have a lot of money. Now the lesson from this is that when you go to the market with handmade products, you have to not only be able to provide quality, but you have to provide quality at all these levels of India, because India is not one market, it's many. The same thing applies overseas, because when some years ago, you know, the global economy was hit by a crisis in the 90s, or was it the early 2000s, interestingly enough, nowhere in the world was the demand for handmade products declining. It did not increase at the rate that one would want, but it did not decline. Here again was a lesson that there is a market for quality. And this comes back to what Dr. Beena and others were saying is, are we able to communicate the story? Because in recent, one of the issues that we seem to face is that when our artisans go to the market, even though new technologies is changing this, Instagram and everything else that people have mentioned, they are not able to communicate the value of what they have put on the table.
And unless you communicate the value of that, then these issues arise. Why should I pay so much when I can get probably a machine-made product which will be less expensive? So it's a marketing challenge for us to be able to identify these market segments, to be able to communicate with them effectively, and above all now, when we're talking about rural artisans, to be able to empower them to be able to deal with this challenge. Because they don't have large advertising budgets. They cannot do mass advertising. But the value of what they produce has to be communicated. For example, the product you just saw from Khamir. Look at the stories behind that. Yeah. One big story which she mentioned only in passing is the pastoral community of Kutch. Now there are huge numbers of people in this country who are today concerned and worried about pastoral communities. Can we find a way to communicate that product to those communities? Because immediately you might get a bunch of orders for that product and other similar products. So there's a challenge here which is a marketing challenge. And it's not easy. Just now, what some of us are trying to do, and we've had some success in this, is to develop training modules in how to promote your product effectively, which artisans can understand in their own language, which they can use using a smartphone to communicate the value of their product to the market. And we're beginning to see that this begins to work, because people are using these codes, etc., to be able to identify a market. If it's a high-end product, people say, why should I pay 20,000 rupees for this sari? Well, that code tells you why you should do it. And I actually saw this happening in a shop in Ahmedabad, where the retailer had both the authentic Banarasi brocade as well as Powerloom Surat equivalent. And he was offering both. And while I was in the shop, the retailer put the weaver onto his smartphone, and within 10 or 15 minutes, a lady walked out with her bag with that Banarasi sari. Because she could communicate, she could understand, because she was giving it as a gift. She had a story, and as she was leaving, she tells the manager of the shop, why don't you put something in this bag so that when I give it to this person, they will understand what I just heard. And she walked out happy but in a bit of a huff, because now how would she communicate all this? And if she doesn't communicate it, would those people understand the value? So I'm sorry to take a bit of time on this, but it is so important to develop these capacities. There's no simple answer. But the market is becoming so competitive that unless we develop these smarts, there's going to be a problem. What is it made of again? Okay. Okay. And how does that story get communicated? Yeah, but in a shop where this is available, how at that point of sale is this story told?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Why CID is one of the programs CE works with, Young Reporters of Environment, and some of the projects focus on how do you upcycle things. So, yeah, please, ma'am.
Slightly out of context, but I would like to share with this audience that Handloom, moving a little out, we are also looking as a way of, because we have some stalls in Delhi Hart, as you must be aware. So from February 1st to 10th, what we are doing is an exclusive exhibition on upcyclers. So my 40 stalls, I'm giving it to 40 upcycling units. In fact, India has got 100 plus upcycling startups which have been registered under the textile committee. So that is my audience. So I just thought I should share if anybody travels to Delhi, because the reason why we are doing it at that point of time is Bharatex is coming. So sustainability is core to Bharatex also. So we thought there will be some kind of alignment.
Without even taking the permission of the moderator, and maybe it'll address the price point situation. I'll take it in two ways. One was respected Chatterjee sharing that how does the community sees the value. So what we recently did in 2025, very recently, just 3 days back. So this was our bestseller that I showed you. So the consumer aligns with it. It's a high-priced jacket. It's unisex. Anyone can wear it. Great product. But how do I convince the herder that you need to continue rearing the sheep so that it gives you better return? Money is one, but the product is so good. So in 2025, we took a very different approach. We did the photo shoot of this product with a model wearing this jacket and also the Rabari herder from whom we purchased standing alongside wearing this jacket, and release that in the market. So when he wears this jacket, he feels so proud that my wool of the sheep turned into this beautiful piece. You can look at that. He's wearing the Kalori jacket. And this is just a raw picture. It's under editing now. So it creates a whole lot of motivation, which is non-monetary. Now, this is one example. Another is an initiative we did in Mundra cluster with batik artisans. Now, if you are aware, it's a resist technique that uses wax. And batik is available for like 250, 300 rupees suit pieces in the local market. Over time, what happened? Ajrak took over and batik artisans were suffering badly. One of the initiatives was also revival. Another was, how do we go back to community wearing batik again, which is at a better price? So we made a balance, which was not handmade, that you just take handmade and don't take machine made. We still took mill-made fabric, but we used natural dyes. So the cost was 450, it's not 250, 300, but then you are buying less. So instead of buying 3 suits every quarter, the women were just buying probably 1 suit. And this shift has been slow, but over 3 years, batik has seen almost a revival. Like now they are, and then again there's another initiative with Dr. Beena must be aware. It happens in Odisha, and while I was there, I saw that a lot of colleges and universities, especially areas like Sambalpur, where Pasapalli Ikat is like a heritage piece, they introduce that as uniforms for the girls and boys. So you have Sambalpuri Ikat shirts and suits, because education has the budget, so the uniforms can be handlooms, which is a great way to introduce at that age and also play with volumes, because the weaver keeps getting insured orders. So these are very, I felt that with your question, these are very relevant examples that are happening already. And as he said, marketing is a key. Like that's a part of relevance, which Samvit also spoke about. I mean, we can't escape the marketing bit. Thank you.
I'd just like to add one word. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Beena is Development Commissioner Handlooms. But why I emphasize that word development is from the conversation that you've just heard. What she represents is not just one sector called handloom, it's a whole ecosystem. And the ability of her work to succeed depends on all these connections. So when one looks at her office and what she does, do they actually appreciate that the Development Commissioner of Handlooms, the Development Commissioner of Handicrafts, are representing a gigantic ecosystem with these huge implications, not just for the people who are directly identified as weavers, but for the entire systems that they operate, including the pastoral community that you just saw, which is one of the most threatened communities in our country. We are destroying their ecosystem, we're taking away their grasslands, we're taking away their raw materials. We are talking about all of this under the rubric of progress, and we are forgetting that what that one product represents is the survival of this country and of the planet that this country is part of.
Thank you for those comments. And Madam, if you have any comments, may I invite Kartikeya Bhai for the closing remarks, please?
Thank you. It's been such a fascinating panel to hear. I would like to first say that we are just now rewriting the textbooks under the NCRT and the National Curriculum Framework. And one of the things which is being stressed in this very clearly is Indian traditions and values have to get into these books. And I think much of what we said that children need to understand these things right from the beginning. And I think this is the direction in which the government the NCF and NEP is that. And I think, Dr. Veena, we should work, that committee should really have a session with you to see how we can incorporate more of that, including the idea of that kit or something else, what can really go into this thing. With Ashokji also we were talking about that handloom kit. People have never actually seen, and it's so fascinating even to see how cloth is weaved. I was also thinking about this whole cost issue, and the real problem is in the costing. That mill fabric which you get does not have environmental cost in it. You know, so and this one, so that if you actually put the real cost, handloom is not more expensive. But the point is that one sector gets away by having an environmental cost which is not absorbed by them and absorbed through other government schemes of cleanups and everything else. But if you add that cleanup cost to that yardage which you buy, then actually this is much cheaper. So this is a problem. Now I was just thinking while I was sitting there, how do you solve that problem? Because it's all very well to say, but they will say that's correct. But then what is it to me? I still have to buy it. So I was just wondering whether this carbon credit system which we have, can we really work on carbon credits for every yardage which we buy, and really see if that can somehow, the value can go back to the artisan, the carbon credit. Individually, it's very difficult. But for instance, Khamir or an organization like this, or DC Handloom itself, if we can develop a overall thing, because as you say, by definition, it is sustainable. You don't have to, I mean, you are not using power, you're not using this. So if that can be done, so this difference between the environmental costs is in fact the carbon credit. Now, if that carbon credit can go, and not to make it look like a subsidy, because then again, people will say you're giving subsidies and how long can you give subsidies? This is actually a scheme for people who are doing sustainable work. And it is a way of recognizing what is sustainable. So I thought maybe we can work together to see and do it on an experimental basis. Maybe in Kutch or one area we can do it on an experimental basis, saying that this is in fact the saving, and then how do you get it back to them through an innovative mechanism. The whole Amul concept, it was not the technology which was new, in fact, but what Dr. Kurian and they did was to find a methodology of measuring the fat in the milk, for instance, and being able to connect tradition of traditional way in which a cattle is kept with a very modern industry of selling. So the marketing is extremely modern, but it didn't go back and force the manufacturers of milk to necessarily change in that way, that they could still maintain that tradition. So India has examples of ways in which you can maintain traditions and yet make a big success. And I think with your leadership in this and with this deep understanding, I think we should do that. And if BharatTex gives us that opportunity, I think we can develop the argument a little more and actually present it at that time. So, Janki, let's thank yes, please. So, let's thank. Yes, please.
Sir, we do study about life cycle assessment of entire garment. Like for Levi's, it has been
Yeah,
done, or for any
I think so.
manufacturing shop.
Yeah, yeah. Some people have done that, but I think more of that needs to be done. I thought before we end the session, Dr. Meena, would you like to say something? I think closing comments. Yeah.
So thank you for this opportunity. So very often in government, the problem is that we look at sectors in terms of schemes, in terms of numbers, number of clusters assisted, number of looms distributed, number of chapals, and my monitoring mechanism is also what percentage of your budget have you spent. So it's a very monetary, it's a numerical way of looking at a system, and today the inputs I've received is very valuable to me in the sense the storytelling which actually I should be propagating is very often not seen in my discourse and my discussions. You don't see storytelling in any government platform. So I must say I'm very grateful for the kind of insights I've received and some very valuable points. In fact, a very simple, innocuous question has led to a lot of nuances in the way we look at it. Coming to how do we take this forward, I think this life cycle assessment is something which I have also, in fact, I was requesting UNEP also to sort of participate in it, because at the end of the day, we should come out with something which will be, recognized internationally also. So we can look further on that, and the marketing, the layering of the marketing, and how to sort of present your product for various audiences in various methods. So I think that is also a takeaway which I really value, because when we do marketing support, how we can integrate that into. So these are some very valuable learnings and insights I've received. But more importantly, I think this collaboration that we have through a book which has started and which is now continuing, and maybe we'll move on to the syllabus formation also. So I think that is what will this partnership and collaboration is something which we are looking forward to. So I think all of you present in this room, you are all, by your very presence, you are contributing to a discourse which is core to the sustainability dialogue. And as Development Commissioner Handlooms, I mean, while Karthike will be doing his thanks, I think I should thank, as a champion of my sector, I would thank all of you for your insights and suggestions. Thank you so much.